20. That's how many times Patricia Langford called the police on my RV in 21 days. Not for blocking traffic, not for blasting music. No, Patricia called because, according to her, at 2:14 a.m., my RV was threatening the visual harmony of Crescent Ridge. That's a real quote. She read it off a clipboard like she was delivering a Supreme Court opinion. The engine hadn't been on since 8 o'clock that evening, but that didn't stop her from sneaking up my driveway with a decibel app and holding it out like she was tracking bat frequencies. The real noise, of course, was Patricia's voice bouncing off the stucco. It's a sound that sits somewhere between a kazoo solo and a dentist's drill if both had a vendetta. But Patricia didn't know I was documenting everything too, and by the time I was done, she'd be staring at her own defeat every single morning over coffee through that same kitchen window she used to spy on me. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twists, justice, and just the right amount of HOA chaos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. Let me back up. My name's Tom Ellery. 6 months ago, I thought I'd finally found peace. After the longest divorce in the history of Southern Illinois and 22 years of corporate burnout, I needed space, sunlight, and 0 reminders of couples therapy. Crescent Ridge looked perfect on paper. Neatly trimmed lawns, tree-lined streets, and homeowners who waved like extras in a Christmas commercial. I bought a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a wide concrete driveway and just enough soul to start over. Most importantly, it had the space to park my pride and joy, a 30-foot Winnebago adventurer I named Mildred, after my grandma, who used to swear by camping, canning, and never trusting anyone with too many yard signs. I'd worked 2 decades to afford that RV. It was my sanctuary on wheels. Every Friday, I'd load it up with coffee, books, and a cooler full of leftovers and head for state parks where the biggest conflict was whether to roast marshmallows or bratwursts. For 3 glorious weeks, life was quiet. The neighbors smiled. One even complimented Mildred's paint job. I mowed the lawn, minded my business, and took weekend trips to the Ozarks. I'd park the RV in my driveway during the week to clean it, restock, and fix whatever squirrels had tampered with. Nothing permanent, nothing public, just me using my own space the way any grown adult with property rights and a pulse would. Then came Patricia. It was a Friday evening in early September. I'd just backed Mildred in when I heard someone yell, "Excuse me! Excuse me!" like I'd run over their petunias. I turned off the engine and climbed down to find a woman power walking across my yard like she was trying out for a HOA-themed action movie. She was in her mid-50s, hair the color of a lemon rind, wearing a floral blouse that looked like it was designed by an angry couch. But what really struck me was the massive canvas tote slung over her shoulder, bulging with folders, rulers, a level, and what looked like a breathalyzer. She introduced herself as Patricia Langford, president of the Crescent Ridge Homeowners Association, and then promptly pointed at my RV like it had committed a felony. "That," she hissed, "is unacceptable." I blinked, assuming she meant the music I had playing, but no, she meant Mildred. I explained, politely, that the RV was parked on my own driveway, wasn't blocking anything, and was there temporarily. She pulled out her phone and began snapping photos from every angle like she was cataloging a UFO landing. "It degrades the neighborhood's aesthetic standards," she muttered, pulling out a tape measure that unrolled with a squeal I swear was choreographed. I watched, half amused and half alarmed, as she measured the RV's length, height, distance from my mailbox, and possibly its emotional aura. She even held a level up to the side panel. "This," she announced, "violates the visual plane established by the Ridge Covenant in 2007. That's not a joke, she really said that. She packed up her circus of tools and declared, "You'll be hearing from us. This is just the beginning." The next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my windshield with purple duct tape. It was printed in Comic Sans, because of course it was, and riddled with typos. The final line, underlined 3 times in glitter pen, read, "This is just the beginning." That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a neighborhood association. I was dealing with a monarch. Patricia wasn't protecting property values. She was defending a personal kingdom she'd constructed from passive-aggressive bylaws and second-hand stationery. I spent the weekend buried in HOA documents and found 3 lines about RVs. 3. They couldn't be permanent, couldn't block roads, and couldn't be used as homes. Nothing about short-term parking. Nothing about aesthetic planes or sound frequencies, but buried deep in the minutes of random special meetings were Patricia's custom addendums, rubber-stamped during 6-person Zoom calls where she was the only voice heard. Patricia hadn't joined the HOA, she'd become it. And now, she had me in her sights like I was the last man on her hit list. But here's the thing Patricia never considered. I might have looked like just another guy in cargo shorts with a glorified road trip mobile, but I've spent my life in network security. I know how to gather evidence. I know how to build a case. And more importantly, I know how to play the long game. While she was out in her front yard with binoculars and a clipboard, I was setting up cameras, logging timestamps, and creating a digital file that would one day make a lawyer smile like it was Christmas. Patricia thought she could wear me down with notes, noise complaints, and neighbors who stopped waving. What she didn't know was that some of us don't mind camping out in the mud, especially when we've got a plan to pave over the Queen's castle. If the first round with Patricia felt like a bad first date, awkward, confusing, a little too close to home, this was the part where things got straight up creepy. She didn't just escalate, she detonated. Within a week of our first chat, I was receiving daily citations from the Crescent Ridge HOA, each more absurd than the last. One warned that my RV had exceeded neighborhood brightness limits, as if I'd parked a lighthouse on the lawn. Another cited me for non-harmonious vehicular shapes. I'm not making that up. Apparently, my Winnebago was too rectangular to coexist peacefully with her vision of suburban symmetry. Patricia even tried to ban reflective surfaces, which by her logic included chrome bumpers, solar panels, and, wait for it, windshield wipers with a shine. It wasn't enforcement. It was theater. She paraded past my house every morning at 7:01 a.m. sharp, clicking photos like a fashion critic judging an RV runway. Her clipboard never left her hand like it was surgically attached, and her pen? Bright pink, glittery, and furious. Then came the visits from Deputy Russ Landry. Poor guy. The first time he showed up, he looked mildly amused. By the 4th time, he was bringing a half-gallon thermos and a look in his eye like I'd invited him to purgatory. He'd trudge up the walk, sip his triple espresso, and mutter, "Ms. Langford again?" like it was part of his Miranda rights. He had a kind face, weathered by years of barbecues, budget cuts, and small-town nonsense, but even he was starting to crack under the daily barrage of Patricia's panic. She reported my RV for sonic reverberation one morning. When Russ got there, he looked at my perfectly silent driveway, tilted his head, and said, "You got ghost campers or something?" By visit number 6, we weren't even pretending anymore. He'd glance around, jot a note or two, and warn me softly, "You might want to start documenting this. It's not normal." I didn't have the heart to tell him. I already had a spreadsheet, a Dropbox folder, and 3 motion-activated cameras rolling. But Patricia wasn't just content playing sheriff. No, she wanted to be Congress, too. After her citations failed to scare me into exile, she did what any HOA despot with a fragile ego would do. She rewrote the laws. Suddenly, there were emergency HOA meetings with suspiciously low attendance and mysteriously swift votes. The next morning, a thick envelope showed up at my door, titled Revised Crescent Ridge Recreational Vehicle Guideline. It was 20 pages of bureaucratic poetry. And by poetry, I mean paranoia in Times New Roman. According to the new rules, RVs couldn't be longer than 25 feet, wider than 8 feet, or taller than a mature Labrador. They couldn't have decals, solar panels, visible storage compartments, or external colors other than desert beige or cottage cream. They couldn't remain parked longer than 3 hours unless you had a notarized HOA permit signed by 2 board members and witnessed by a licensed notary. The whole thing was so blatantly aimed at my rig that I half expected the last page to just say, "No Mildreds allowed." I filed an appeal. I even offered to work with the board to draft compromise guidelines, something that balanced aesthetics and common sense. Patricia ignored every email. A week later, a tow notice was posted on my RV windshield. The document cited violation of Section 14, Paragraph 2, non-conforming vehicular dimensions. It sounded like my RV had committed a felony. I had 48 hours to move it or face daily fine. I tried to reason with the board. I tried to reason with Patricia, but reasoning with Patricia was like arguing with a vending machine. You press the right buttons, wait politely, and still get nothing but noise. That Friday, I watched as my Winnebago, my sanctuary, my escape, my Mildred, was towed away like some kind of criminal on wheels. Patricia stood on her porch across the street, arms folded, chin lifted, the grin of a person who believed she'd just won something important. "Thank you for your cooperation," she called out, snapping one last photo for what she called compliance documentation. I didn't reply. I just nodded slowly as if I'd finally accepted defeat. But inside, I wasn't defeated. I was done playing defense. I stood in my now empty driveway and realized something Patricia hadn't. You can't scare someone who's already been through worse. A woman like her only knows how to swing the rules like a hammer. What she doesn't know is how to deal with someone who builds smarter tools. That night, I sat at my desk with every notice, every photo, every one of Russ's police reports, and started organizing them into categories, not just for legal purposes, for storytelling, for strategy, for the long game. Because if Patricia thought she could control Crescent Ridge by paper-cutting people into submission, she hadn't met someone stubborn enough or bored enough to turn her rule book into a playbook. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. The message was short, typed in perfect caps. "You're not the first, and she's not done." No name, no context. Just quiet confirmation that I wasn't alone in this. And maybe, just maybe, the war Patricia thought she'd already won was only just beginning. If you think Patricia's HOA games were bad, wait until you see what happens when the neighbors start talking and the skeletons in her filing cabinet start falling out. Trust me, the story's just heating up, and the best revenge? It hasn't even rolled onto the driveway yet. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your HOA horror story, and buckle up, because in the next chapter the war gets legal, the allies get loud, and Patricia, well, she's about to wish she stuck to gardening. The day I met Frank Coleman, he was elbow-deep in a busted water pump, wearing a denim shirt older than I was and cursing the manufacturer's lineage back to the Great Depression. Frank was the kind of guy who looked like he should have been on a pack of beef jerky. Stoic, sun-weathered, and deeply unimpressed by nonsense. His land sat directly behind mine, 5 acres of what Patricia probably referred to as visual chaos. To me, it looked like heaven. Wild oak trees, a rust-colored barn that leaned just enough to suggest wisdom, and a scattering of chickens that obeyed no human law. He'd apparently been dealing with Patricia's HOA fanfare for 3 years. Harassment about his tractor noise, anonymous complaints about unregulated fencing, and one particularly idiotic demand that he paint his barn earth tone compliant. Frank had refused, politely but firmly. "She sent me a letter once about my chickens being too vocal," he told me, straight fade. "I mailed her back a bag of feed and a set of earplugs." That's when the real conversation started. Frank leaned on his shovel and nodded toward my house like he already knew my story. "Saw him tow your rig last week," he said. "She does that. Pushes folks until they fold or snap. But you didn't look folded." I admitted I was gathering data, biding my time. That made him chuckle. "You think you might be in the mood for some land?" he asked casually, as if offering me lemonade. Turns out, Frank had tried selling his 5 acres a few times. Patricia herself had offered him insultingly low prices under the pretense of community expansion. He declined every time. "I don't sell to tyrants," he said, "but I'd sell to you, especially if it ruffles her feathers," his exact words. That's when I realized what he was offering wasn't just real estate. It was an opportunity. Frank's land sat just outside HOA jurisdiction, technically zoned for mixed-use agricultural and light commercial. In Patricia's world, it was basically Switzerland, with tractors. Enter Megan Slade, real estate attorney, HOA survivor, slightly terrifying in the best way. She was a friend of a friend, and when I explained my situation, her eyes lit up like it was her birthday and I'd brought cake and litigation. Turns out, Megan knew Patricia. Not in a we-went-to-school-together way, but in a she tried to sue one of my clients over decorative mailbox height way. Megan still had the files. She didn't just dislike Patricia, she had legal receipts. When I mentioned Frank's offer, she practically lunged for her laptop. "Do you have any idea how rare this is?" she said, opening maps, zoning laws, and permit databases like she was decoding the Da Vinci Code. "This land is a golden loophole. With the right filing strategy and county support, we could have a legally zoned RV campground up and running before she even knows what hit her." She paused, then added with a grin, "All perfectly permitted, all perfectly visible from her breakfast nook." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An RV campground, built legally, outside her rulebook and right next door to her manicured empire? It felt like destiny had just handed me a blueprint for poetic justice. Frank was on board from the start. "I don't care what you build," he said, "as long as it drives her up a wall. Hell, I'll even help you dig the power lines." Megan got to work immediately. She laid out a multi-phase strategy, purchase the land through a private LLC to avoid triggering neighborhood gossip, apply for permits across different departments to fly under the radar, and secure zoning approvals under Crescent Ridge's recreational development incentives. Every step would be legal, clean, and irreversible. The best part? Patricia wouldn't know until it was far too late to stop it. "Do Patricia?" Megan said, tapping the map. "This land is the final frontier. Wild, ungoverned, and terrifying. Let's keep it that way." That night, I walked the property with Frank under a sky so clear it felt like nature was rooting for us. The oaks rustled, the grass crunched, and somewhere in the distance, one of Patricia's motion-detecting floodlights blinked on, triggered by nothing but wind and paranoia. Standing there, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Purpose. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about balance. About taking back something that had been unfairly yanked away. "We can do this fast and quiet," Megan had whispered earlier, her voice low like a general planning an ambush. "By the time she smells smoke, you'll already be lighting the campfires." That line stuck with me, because for the first time since moving to Crescent Ridge, I wasn't just reacting, I was building. And what we were about to build? It was going to turn Patricia's precious HOA fantasy land into a front-row seat for the one thing she hated most: freedom. Don't go anywhere, the next part gets even better. The next few weeks were a delicate ballet of legal paperwork, fake compliance, and neighborhood acting. While Megan filed permits with surgical precision, I played the part of the chastened homeowner. I waved politely, trimmed my hedges, and even parked my car within HOA regulations just to keep up appearances. Frank, meanwhile, took it to another level. He accidentally left out an old rocking chair and a pile of rusted fence posts just to keep Patricia guessing. It was like we were starring in a suburban heist movie, where the treasure wasn't money, it was a county-approved, HOA-proof slap in the face. Megan called it the quiet stage. I called it the smirk phase. Every time Patricia passed my house with her clipboard and narrowed eyes, I gave her a smile so polite it was practically a dare. But Patricia's paranoia is like a heat-seeking missile. It always finds something to target. She started what she called perimeter reconnaissance missions. Translation, she'd drive by Frank's property at 2 miles per hour, squinting out her window like she was auditioning for Neighborhood Watch, Apocalypse Edition. One morning, she even wandered onto Frank's land by mistake, trying to photograph a row of survey stakes. She didn't understand. Frank, being the gentleman he is, greeted her with a camcorder and a firm reminder that trespassing laws apply even to HOA royalty. She backed off quickly, but the seed was planted. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. And that, my friend, is the kind of tension you can't fake. You could feel it on the street. Neighbors were whispering, dogs barked louder when she walked by, Even the squirrels seemed jumpier. And then it happened. The final county approval landed like a thunderclap. Pine Hollow RV Campground. Fully legal, environmentally cleared, and shovel-ready. Megan practically skipped into my kitchen holding the stamped permit like she'd won the state lottery. I didn't even ask how she got it through that fast. She just smiled and said, "It's amazing what you can do when you follow the rules better than the people who wrote them." We decided to unveil it at the next HOA meeting. Because poetic timing is everything. I arrived 15 minutes late with a manila folder and the kind of grin that only comes from knowing you're about to change the temperature in a room. Patricia was mid-sentence, reciting her latest monologue on preserving the visual dignity of Crescent Ridge. I waited for her to finish, then walked calmly to the front. "Evening, neighbors," I said, laying out the permits like playing cards. "I just wanted to share a little community update. Starting next month, we'll be opening Pine Hollow RV Campground right behind Crescent Ridge. 20 fully equipped sites, Wi-Fi, picnic shelters, and bathrooms, cleaner than your HOA records." The room fell silent, and then Patricia cracked. "This is an invasion," she shouted, slamming her binder shut like it had betrayed her. "This is commercial terrorism." One board member coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh. Another asked if the bathrooms would be handicap accessible. I answered yes. I may be petty, but I'm not heartless. Patricia, on the other hand, looked like she'd just been told her tiara was counterfeit. She demanded an emergency injunction. Megan pulled out the stamped permits like holy scripture and simply said, "No grounds." The look on Patricia's face, worth every citation, every tow, every passive-aggressive sticky note I'd ever received. That weekend, Patricia tried to rally the troops. She called it a protest, but it looked more like a solo art installation. She stood at the entrance to Frank's property in a sun hat and lawn chair, holding a sign that said, "Make Suburbia Great Again." A confused neighbor asked if it was a political protest. She scowled and yelled, "This is about aesthetics," which only made it funnier. At one point, she tried to stop a visiting RV couple from turning in. Told them they were trespassing on residential soil. The husband waved his campground reservation at her like a badge. The wife asked if she was the welcome committee. That's when Deputy Russ showed up for what he now called his daily sanity check. He walked right past her, waved at me, and said, "Smells like coffee and clean permits." Patricia nearly imploded. She muttered something about county corruption and stormed off, leaving her lawn chair and sign behind like relics of a failed revolution. But the best part? The phones started ringing. Within 48 hours of the campground announcement, we had 6 bookings for opening weekend and 3 long-term reservations for retirees chasing warmer weather and decent Wi-Fi. The idea that my property, once a battleground of fines and fake noise violations, was now a hub of recreational joy, all while being perfectly legal, hit Patricia like a slow-motion train of reality, and she still wasn't done. Oh no, because when she picked up that phone and called the county planning office to report commercial RV terrorism, she had no idea what she was setting in motion. But I did. And if you thought this part was satisfying, wait until you see what happens when the lawsuit comes around. Trust me, the unraveling is just getting started. 3 days after Pine Hollow RV Campground opened its gates, I got a knock on my door and a packet in the mail. Patricia was suing. The complaint was a hysterical cocktail of legal jargon, neighborhood paranoia, and grammar that should have been charged separately. She was accusing me of public nuisance, visual pollution, emotional erosion, and something called RV encroachment anxiety. She'd hired the most expensive law firm in the county, probably the same one that writes the fine print on timeshare scams. But instead of panicking, Megan smiled like she'd just found the last piece of a puzzle she didn't even know she was missing. "Perfect," she said, flipping through the packet. She filed first, that means discovery. She said the word like a magician, unveiling the secret compartment in her top hat. Now we get to see how she runs her little kingdom. And boy, did we. What we uncovered wasn't just HOA mismanagement. It was a full-blown masterclass in suburban autocracy. Megan's team requested Patricia's emails, budgets, board meeting notes, and financial records. What came back was a treasure trove of dysfunction. Turns out Patricia didn't just take her HOA presidency seriously, she took it personally. There was a folder labeled Concerns, but inside it read like a psychological dossier. She had files on at least 6 neighbors, complete with photos, timestamps, and handwritten notes like Mrs. Becker, emotionally unstable about lawn gnomes, and Tom E equals potential agitator, possibly ex-military, or ex-con command. She ran the HOA like it was a Cold War spy agency. She even had code names for people. Mine was Mr. Big Rig. Frank's was The Fence. There was even a flowchart connecting people she didn't trust with arrows labeled hostile to aesthetic norms. But the best part? The money trail. Megan found years of sketchy reimbursements from the HOA fund, $312.00, labeled security training that went to a spa retreat in Sedona, $145.00 for communication supplies that turned out to be monogrammed stationery that read President for Life, and a $39.00 charge at a pool supply store for a float in the shape of a crown labeled HOA Queen. We found receipts for personal legal bills, hair appointments, and even a monthly car payment, justified in the budget as patrol vehicle expenses. It wasn't just petty theft. It was delusional embezzlement with flair. And now we had all of it, itemized, time-stamped, and ready for daylight. The HOA's next emergency meeting was supposed to address campground concerns, but once Megan dropped the receipts, the focus shifted hard and fast. The meeting was standing room only. Residents came with folded arms and pursed lips. Patricia walked in with her lawyer and 3-ring binder, expecting a victory lap. Instead, she got the equivalent of a live forensic audit. Megan opened calmly, thanked everyone, and laid out a short, devastating PowerPoint, where your HOA fees actually went. Each slide came with a receipt, a timestamp, and just enough pause for the crowd to process the absurdity. One resident gasped at the emergency leaf blower invoice for $799.00. Another muttered, "You've got to be kidding me," at the Uber receipts for meetings held across the street. When Megan finished, she simply said, "Any questions?" That's when the room erupted. People demanded refunds, apologies, explanations. Some just demanded Patricia leave. A retired Navy vet stood up and asked, "Ma'am, did you really bill us for surveillance enhancements that turned out to be binoculars and folding chairs?" Patricia opened her mouth, but it was too late. She melted down right there in front of everyone. First, she denied everything. Then she blamed the treasurer, who had resigned 2 years earlier. Then she claimed Megan forged the documents. Then she pivoted to me, shouting that I was part of a deep neighborhood conspiracy funded by RV lobbyists. I wish I were exaggerating. She pointed at neighbors like they were undercover agents and accused the board of betrayal, the county of corruption, and me of, her words, domestic campground extremism. Her lawyer tried to calm her down, but she yanked the mic and screamed, "You people don't understand what it takes to protect this community." That's when the board president, well, technically still her, called for a vote to remove her. The vote wasn't close, it was unanimous. Even her husband voted yes. Then, in a moment I will never forget, someone from the back yelled, "Let Tom do it!" And just like that, the room, previously full of suspicion and quiet rebellion, started chanting, "Tom! Tom! Tom!" I tried to wave it off, but Frank leaned in and said, "You started this. Might as well finish it." The motion was made, I was nominated, I was elected on the spot. I walked up, stunned, took the microphone Patricia had just dropped, and said, "First order of business, we stop treating lawn gnomes like gang members." Laughter, applause, relief. Just like that, the empire had fallen, and the HOA had a new sheriff. But Frank wasn't done. He leaned over, smirking, and whispered, "Now, what are you going to do with all that power, Mr. President?" And I'll be honest, at that moment I wasn't sure, but I knew this. Whatever I did next, Patricia was going to feel it. Stay with me. The final chapter? That's where we win for real. 6 months later, Pine Hollow Campground isn't just surviving, It's booked out through next year and featured in 3 different RV travel magazines. The same patch of land that Patricia once called a threat to suburban dignity is now a hotspot for retirees in Winnebogos, weekenders with pop-up campers, and one guy from Arizona who's convinced his Airstream improves the local property values just by being shiny. The gravel paths are clean, the Wi-Fi is strong, and the bathrooms? Let's just say they're cleaner than Patricia's HOA accounting ever was. Families roast marshmallows under the same stars that used to light up her security floodlights, and every time I hear a kid laugh or a fire crackle, I remember what it felt like to be afraid to park in my own driveway. That fear is gone now, replaced by freedom, coffee, and the smell of pinwood and poetic justice. The county's tourism board ended up loving the campground so much they used it on their spring brochure cover. Picture this, a wide-angle shot of Frank's old pasture, now dotted with colorful RVs, twinkle lights, and folks lounging by fire pits like they're in a Norman Rockwell painting sponsored by Propane. Right at the entrance, there's a handmade sign Frank and I carved ourselves that reads, "Crescent Ridge, community, not control." Visitors snap selfies with it, kids pose under it, and the locals, well, let's just say more than a few neighbors have quietly wandered over to book a site just for the grandkids. Funny how quickly minds change when peace and profit start replacing paranoia and purple pens. The very people who once crossed the street to avoid me now bring cookies to the office. It's almost enough to make me believe in second chances, almost. Deputy Russ still stops by, but now it's for coffee and stories, not complaints. He says his blood pressure has dropped a full 20 points since Patricia left. "You'd think fewer fake noise reports would be good for the soul," he said last week, "but it's the peace that gets you. That quiet kind of peace." We sit on the porch most mornings, sipping from chipped mugs while watching the campground come alive. Coffee pots whistling, doors creaking open, the occasional overly enthusiastic dog leading its owner on a morning jog. It's become a ritual. No code violations, no emergency meetings, just the soft hum of life being lived freely, the way it should have been from the start. The same street that used to feel like a minefield now feels like a community. Turns out all it took was a little exposure therapy, with bonus marshmallows. As for Patricia, the aftermath hit her like a tax audit in slow motion. After the embezzlement came out, she was ordered to repay the HOA fund in full, plus penalties and legal fees. She had to sell her house, yes, the one with the perfect view of my former RV. And rumor has it she moved to a gated community in Florida, where she's already made enemies with the pickleball league and tried to outlaw flamingo. I'm told she filed a motion to require beige patio furniture for visual continuity. Some folks never learn. But here, we did. Crescent Ridge is no longer ruled by fear of citations. It's a place where people wave again, not out of obligation, but because they mean it. We built something better, not by burning it all down, but by outsmarting the Matchbox Queen with her own rulebook. I think back often to why I moved here in the first place. I wanted peace, something quiet, a clean break. I didn't want to fight anybody, but life has a way of handing you the fight anyway and giving you just enough tools to win it right. I never asked to become the symbol of resistance in a neighborhood drama that played out like a Netflix miniseries. But I'll tell you this, the look on people's faces when they parked their RVs across from Patricia's old lot, that's peace. That's purpose. That's Mildred, my old RV, back in my driveway, under a sky with no clipboards. I get asked sometimes if I regret any of it, the stress, the citations, the slow burn of bureaucracy, but the truth is, I don't. Because what Patricia tried to weaponize, I used it like a scalpel, and now she has to live with what she built, or better yet, move out. And that, folks, is how a man looking for peace found purpose, not by yelling louder, but by thinking sharper, not by fighting fire with fire, but by building something so legal, so lasting, and so liberating that even the clipboard brigade couldn't stop it. What started as one woman's mission to control a driveway ended in a community learning what freedom really looks like. Not beige, not silent, but alive, diverse, and built on fairness, not fear. If you've ever felt backed into a corner by someone hiding behind rules they twist for power, Let this be your blueprint. You don't have to shout. You don't have to stoop. Just document everything. Stay patient, and when the time is right, use their own system to build something better. This story wasn't just about an RV or a petty HOA president. It was about standing up, not with fists, but with facts. It was about turning harassment into humor, chaos into coffee, and a lonely driveway into a thriving campground that now inspires everyone who drives by. The lesson here is simple. When someone tries to shrink your life down to what fits in their comfort zone, don't fight them on their terms. Expand the map, change the game. And when it's over, smile, because you'll be the one holding the permit. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if it reminded you of your own HOA saga or made you cheer for justice with a side of campfire, drop a comment below. We want to hear where you're watching from and what you think. Hit that like button if you believe freedom should come with full hookups and Wi-Fi. And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, the next story, it'll make this one feel like a warm-up lap. You haven't seen anything yet.